Delaney Whitcomb sat on the hospital bed at Mission Health, her left eye swollen, her right wrist wrapped, looking straight through the one-way glass. On the other side, Gabriel Rourke stood in the interview room with both hands flat on the table. Absolutely still, the way a statue is still. Detective Thurlow asked her, "The man who attacked you last night, is this him?" Delaney closed her eyes and heard the attacker's whisper at her ear once again. "Quiet, Whitcomb." A low southern voice. "The same register as Gabe's." She opened her eyes. "Yes, that's him." Gabe did not blink. 48 hours earlier, Delaney had walked into Rourke Woodworks during her lunch break and placed a custom order for a walnut reading table for her new office. She was precise in the way she moved through the shop, running one fingertip along every mortise joint, checking the wood the way she checked a quarterly report. The showroom smelled of linseed oil and fresh shavings, and behind the showroom the workshop hummed with the low drone of a dust collector. Gabe stood behind the workbench in a faded green flannel and answered only the questions she asked. He was a tall man with a close-cropped beard going silver at the jaw, and he spoke with the brief economy of someone who had learned early that words were inventory. Juno, 9 years old, sat in the corner with a sketch pad on her knees and quietly drew the visitor. She labeled the drawing in the margin in a child's careful print. The woman with eyes like closed windows. Delaney asked the price. Gabe said $2,400. She offered $3,200 for a 2-week turnaround. Gabe declined the rush fee without apology. "Time isn't something I sell, ma'am." For the first time that afternoon, she looked him full in the face. She was used to being told what she wanted to hear. She was not used to being told no by a man who did not seem to notice he was saying it. When Delaney left, Juno held up her drawing. She looked sad. "Daddy." Gabe didn't answer. He watched the black SUV pull away from the curb and disappear down Haywood Road. Then he wrote the order on a yellow pad. Walnut. Reading table, 2 months. He underlined the word walnut once, and he could not have said why he did. That same evening, in the corner office at Whitcomb Marsh Analytics, Delaney confronted Hollis Marsh about an irregularity in the third quarter compliance report. Patient records exported to 3 pharmaceutical partners exceeded contract caps by a factor of 7. Hollis leaned back in his chair, laughed once, and promised to look into it. "Probably a pipeline error. I'll have engineering flag it." Delaney did not smile back. She watched his face a second longer than was comfortable, and then she left without another word. After the door closed, his smile disappeared in pieces. He picked up his personal phone and dialed a number saved only as M. "She's starting to look at it." "I need 3 weeks. You said you had a way." The voice on the other end was calm and unhurried. "By tomorrow morning she'll have something else to worry about." The next evening at 7 o'clock, after a late meeting that ran nearly 2 hours over, Delaney stepped out of the elevator into the underground parking garage beneath her own building. The attacker came from behind a concrete pillar. Blue flannel, dark ball cap, 6'1". A low southern voice. He drove her head into the pillar 3 times, whispered the 6 words at her ear, took her laptop bag, and was gone in 47 seconds. The cameras had been down since 4:47 that afternoon. Scheduled maintenance, the log read. In the emergency room at Mission Health, the doctor told her she had a grade 2 concussion and a sprained wrist. Thurlow came to take her statement at 10:15. She described the voice. Thurlow asked, "Do you remember meeting anyone with a voice like that today?" Delaney hesitated. The pain medication made the room tilt slightly at the edges. She thought about the shop that smelled of linseed oil. About a man who had refused her money. "A carpenter," she said. This morning, 6:40 a.m., 3 cruisers pulled up in front of Rourke Woodworks with their lights off. Juno was at the kitchen table eating cereal. Gabe opened the door, looked at the badges for 2 seconds, and turned to his daughter. "I need to go with these men for a little while. Call Miss Marin." His voice did not shake. Juno nodded, but her grip on the spoon turned her knuckles white. Gabe did not hurry and did not resist. He asked permission to put on his boots. The officer at the door said yes, and Gabe laced them with the same two-loop knot he had taught Juno to tie when she was 4. In the interview room, Thurlow laid down a photograph of Delaney bruised on a pillow. Gabe looked at it for 1 second and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he kept them on the photograph rather than on Thurlow, which Thurlow noted without saying. Thurlow asked where he had been between 6:30 and 7:30 the previous evening. Gabe said he had been alone at the shop, closing up. Juno had been next door with the neighbor. No witnesses. You know Miss Whitcomb identified you? She's mistaken. I wasn't there. Thurlow slid a second sheet across the table. An Ingalls receipt. 3 blocks from the parking garage. 7:12 p.m. Paid with Gabe's debit card. Gabe studied it for longer than he needed to. I haven't used that card in a month. That wallet is in the shop drawer. In the observation room, Detective Sergeant Pilar Estevez walked in with a thin manila folder and laid it in front of Thurlow. Captain, you need to see this before you go any further. It was a notice from the Department of Defense. Gabriel Rourke's military service record was sealed at the secret classification level and could be opened only through a federal request. Pilar kept her voice low. Sir, I served with men who had files like this. Nobody seals a file because someone mopped floors. Thurlow frowned. I don't need to know who he was in the army. I need to know where he was at 7 last night. But his hand slowed as he turned the page. Gabe was told he was being held for 48 hours. He asked to make one call. He did not call a lawyer. He dialed a number he had not used in 3 years, and said 3 things. I need you. Juno. Asheville. He hung up. At Mission Health, Hollis arrived with a bouquet of white lilies and played the worried colleague well. Don't worry about the company. Take as long as you need. Delaney watched his hand tremble slightly when he set the vase down. She said nothing. She filed it. Pilar came for a supplemental statement. How was the light? Delaney was quiet, dark. One of the bulbs in the garage was out. In her car afterward, Pilar pulled out her personal phone and called an old friend from Fort Bragg, Gabriel Rourke. Sid. 2016 to 20. Did he work cases like this? Silence for 4 seconds. Pilar. The man you're asking about is the one they sent when nobody else could figure out who did it. I'll bet you a month's salary somebody's setting him up. That afternoon, Maren brought Juno to the station. Gabe was allowed 10 minutes through the glass. Juno pressed one small palm flat against it. The glass was thick and cold and slightly cloudy, the way glass in rooms like that tended to be. You didn't do it, Daddy. I know. Gabe placed his hand on the glass opposite hers. For the first time since her mother died, he cried. 1 tear. He wiped it fast before she could see. I know you know. You stay calm for me. Read your books. Draw. I'll come home. 36 hours after Gabe's phone call, a man named Wes Callahan drove into Asheville from Raleigh, 42. Former Delta, now running a small private security consultancy out of a warehouse office near the Capitol. No lawyer, no badge, no press. He went first to Maren's house to see Juno, and brought with him a stuffed bear whose eyes were made from the buttons of one of Hannah's old coats. Juno had buried her face in it and cried once, hard, then gone still. She asked him once, carefully, whether her father was going to prison. Wes looked her in the eye and told her no. And then told her the truth he had not planned to tell, which was that he had known her father for 14 years and would sooner believe the sky had done it. I owe your daddy a debt, he said. I'm paying it now. Wes met Pilar at a coffee shop off Merrimon after her shift. He did not share any classified details. He said only what was necessary. If Gabe Rourke wanted to hurt someone, that person would never know what happened. There would be no witness describing a voice. The fact that Miss Whitcomb remembers a voice means the attacker wanted her to remember that voice. You're saying someone is imitating him? Someone studied him first. Ball cap low, flannel off the rack, a phrase no outsider would use. That isn't a mugging. That is a presentation. Pilar stirred her coffee. The Ingalls receipt? Planted. Whoever pulled this knew when he'd be alone, what he wore, where his wallet sat. That takes weeks of watching. Wes asked Peeler for exactly one thing: a list of every customer who had walked into Rourke Woodworks in the past 3 months. Not to investigate Gabe, he said. To investigate who had been investigating Gabe. Pilar agreed to pull the shop's tax records quietly. Meanwhile, Delaney checked herself out of the hospital 2 days early and went home to Biltmore Forest. She could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the same 6 words. She did what she always did when something would not resolve. She opened a notebook and began stripping emotion away from observation. The first thing she had missed was the name. The attacker had called her Whitcomb. Not Delaney, not Miss Whitcomb, just Whitcomb. That was internal shorthand at the company. Board members used it. Her co-founder used it. A carpenter who had met her once, over one order, would not. That afternoon, through Wes, Juno sent an envelope to Delaney's house. Wes rang the bell himself and handed it to the housekeeper. Inside was a child's drawing of Delaney, neat and pressed and tired. The woman with eyes like closed windows. Under it, in careful pencil: "Ma'am, my daddy doesn't know how to hurt anyone. He only knows how to make tables." Delaney held the drawing for a full 10 minutes without moving. Then she put it in the bottom drawer of her desk. She did not tear it. At the office, Hollis called an emergency board meeting and proposed assuming interim CEO duties. 3 of 5 voted yes. One of them, Darrow Finch, had received a Charleston beach house through a shell company the previous month, a gift Hollis had made that would not appear on any tax filing for another year. Delaney was quiet for a long time after her assistant read her the resolution over the phone. Then she said, "Get me the chief accountant, tonight, at my house." That night she began her own audit. Privately. The company laptop had been taken in the attack, but she kept an encrypted personal drive in the safe and had never synced sensitive finance data anywhere else. At the arraignment, Gabe was appointed a public defender named Corbin Ash. Young, thin, serious. Wes quietly hired a second attorney out of his own pocket, Nadine Beaumont from Charlotte, a specialist in military legal matters. Gabe was not told. He only noticed that his defender suddenly had a co-counsel who seemed to know more about federal evidence rules than most public defenders did. The judge set bail at $750,000, citing the violent nature of the charge. Wes posted it within 2 hours through a veterans trust. Gabe was released with an ankle monitor and an order not to leave Buncombe County. He came home. Juno ran into his chest and would not let go for a full minute. He held her and did not speak, and he did not let her see that his own hands were shaking. He sat in the back workshop at midnight, one hand resting on the half-finished walnut table, Delaney's table. 70% complete. He did not know whether to keep working on it. A part of him wanted to leave it exactly where it was and not touch a single fiber of wood until his name had been cleared. Another part knew that if he stopped, he would stop more than one thing. He picked up the sanding block and kept going. The house around him was quiet, in the way a house is quiet when a child has finally fallen asleep after trying hard not to. Delaney, through a private investigator she paid with personal funds, obtained the garage camera's technical log. The public report said routine service. The internal log showed something different. The cameras had been switched off manually at 4:47 by an administrator-level account. There were 3 such accounts in the company. One belonged to Hollis Marsh, another belonged to Delaney herself. The third belonged to a retired CTO who had moved to New Mexico 2 years ago and had not logged in since. She did not call the police. She wanted to be certain. She told the investigator to dig into Hollis's personal spending for the past 6 months and to pay particular attention to any LLCs formed in the last year. 3 nights later, she did something she knew she should not do. She drove to Rourke Woodworks at 9 p.m., parked across the street, and did not get out. She watched Gabe through the shop window for 12 minutes. He was alone, one hand flat on her table, sanding slowly with the other. She did not knock. She drove home. Gabe knew someone was outside. He had seen the reflection of a windshield in the front glass. He did not go to the door. He kept sanding. With the customer list from Wes, Pilar found a small anomaly. 3 weeks before the attack, a man named Dean Harker had placed an order for a small tobacco box. $85. Paid cash. He stayed in the shop 40 minutes, long for an $85 item. Dean Harker did not exist in any public database. No driver's license, no tax return, no utility bill, but the security camera had recorded his face. Tall, brown hair, a low southern voice. Build similar to Gabe's. Pilar pulled the footage and sent a clip to a voice analyst in Charlotte with a 3-day turnaround. At school, another 5th grader told Juno her father was in prison. She did not cry. She took out her sketchbook and drew the boy with his mouth full of ink. Her teacher confiscated the book. Gabe was called in. He sat across from the teacher in a plastic chair meant for a 10-year-old, tired down to the bone, and said one thing. "She's trying. So am I." The teacher returned the sketchbook that afternoon without further comment. 10 days later, Ash and Beaumont filed a motion to suppress Delaney's identification on grounds of lighting conditions and cognitive impairment from concussion. Delaney was required to appear. At 7:50 a.m., Delaney arrived early in the courthouse parking deck. Gabe arrived early too. They reached the elevator at the same time. Neither of them stepped back. 4 seconds of silence. The doors opened. They both got in. The car smelled of cold marble and someone else's coffee. Delaney spoke first. Her analyst's instinct, a reflex for distance. "I shouldn't be speaking to you." "I know. Neither should I." The elevator rose slowly. Delaney kept her eyes on the panel. "I'm not apologizing. I still remember the voice. I'm not asking you to apologize. That voice wasn't mine. But you had no way to know that. You did what you thought was right with what you had." She turned and looked at him. The first time since the hospital. She saw no anger, no grievance, no plea. She saw a man who was tired in a specific way. The way a man is tired after he has already decided not to argue with what cannot yet be argued with. And she noticed something else. The way he stood. Center of gravity low. Shoulders loose. Hands hanging open. She had seen that posture before, in an executive security briefing at the company 2 years ago, when a former Secret Service agent had demonstrated ready stances. It was the stance of a man who had been trained. The doors opened on the 3rd floor. Delaney stepped out first. She paused half a step, turned her head halfway back. "Your daughter drew me with eyes like closed windows." She saw it right. Then she walked down the hall. Gabe stayed in the elevator until the doors closed again. Inside the hearing, Beaumont laid it out cleanly. Light levels in the garage measured below 18 lux, well under the threshold for reliable identification. Contact time, 47 seconds. Grade 2 concussion with retrograde blurring. She cited 3 recent appellate decisions and the Innocence Project's standard brief on eyewitness reliability. The judge did not throw out the identification altogether but ordered the jury, if it came to trial, be instructed on the limited reliability of identification under those conditions. A small win, but a real one. Hollis sat in the gallery playing the role of supportive friend. He brought a bottle of still water and kept looking at the judge as if the outcome might reassure him personally. As Delaney stood to leave, he placed his hand on the small of her back. She froze for a quarter of a second. In that quarter second, her body registered what her mind had been refusing to register. His hand was the same size as the hand that had closed around her throat. She had never considered it. Her reason had ruled him out. Her body had not. She smiled thinly and stepped out from under the hand and did not turn around. That night she did not cry. She opened the safe, took out the encrypted drive, worked until 3 a.m. She built a chart about Hollis's transactions. The first data point aligned. $47,000 wired to a Delaware LLC named Harker Consulting. 4 weeks before the attack. Harker. Dean Harker. She looked at Juno's drawing in the drawer. Then, for the first time in years, she called her father, a retired Duke law professor, and asked a single question. "Dad, I need to know how to talk to the police without breaking a case." Her father was quiet for 5 seconds. "Start with who you trust." not what you have, and write nothing down that a subpoena can reach. Juno came to the shop after school every day. While Gabe worked, she drew. It was how she kept herself steady. Wes sat nearby pretending to read the Citizen Times, actually watching the door. Juno flipped her sketchbook for him, page by page, portraits of the month's customers. Mrs. Linley, who bought a bookshelf, her pearls careful on the page. Mr. Dietrich, who ordered a chair, his pipe drawn with small curls of smoke. The Park couple, who ordered a bed frame, each carried one small telling detail. Wes stopped on a page. Who is this one, Juno? I don't remember his name, but he stood outside the shop a long time. He didn't come in. He watched Daddy work. I drew him through the window. The drawing showed a man in profile, standing beside a streetlight. Left hand holding a phone, and on his left wrist, rendered with surprising precision because Juno liked watches, a Patek Philippe Nautilus with a blue dial and a steel bracelet. Wes photographed the drawing. That watch sold for over $80,000. Dean Harker had worn no watch when he came to pick up his tobacco box. Wes had already reviewed the shop footage, but Hollis Marsh wore exactly that watch. In his most recent company headshot on LinkedIn, it caught the light on his wrist. The date on Juno's drawing matched the day Dean Harker had placed the order, which meant Hollis had been there twice that day. Once inside in disguise, once outside in his own clothes, photographing the shop layout and watching Gabe move, preparing, studying the target. Wes brought the drawing to Pilar. Pilar, without telling Thurlow, drove to Delaney's house that evening. It was the first time the two women sat across from each other without glass between them. Pilar placed the drawing on the kitchen table. Miss Whitcomb, I need to ask you one question, and I need your answer to come without your company counsel in the room. Delaney recognized the watch immediately. She was quiet for 10 seconds. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out her stack of audit charts, and set them on the table beside the drawing. Detective, I have a few things for you too. Pilar listened for 2 hours. The wire to Harker Consulting, the manual camera shutdown, the emergency board meeting, the Charleston house, the retired CTO, who could not have logged in because he had moved to New Mexico 2 years ago. When Delaney was done, she spoke with the flat calm of a woman who had decided. I pointed at an innocent man. I cannot take that back. But I can point at the right one next. Pilar said, you'll have to work with federal prosecutors, not city. There's an assistant U.S. attorney in Charlotte I trust. She'll move fast if the evidence holds. Would you be willing to wear a wire in a meeting with Marsh? Delaney was silent for a full minute. She thought about the trembling hand at the hospital. She thought about the lilies. Yes. That night, Delaney sent a text to the Rourke Woodworks business line. The table. Can you finish it? Gabe, sitting in the workshop, read it twice. He typed back. Finished next week. I'll deliver, if you'll allow it. Delaney. Yes. Deliver to the office, not the house. Gabe, understood. No apology. No explanation. Just a table that would be delivered. A thing that would exist in a room, whether or not they spoke again about the rest of it. At the office, Hollis received a message from his Hong Kong contact. 3 days to close. Do not let anything unusual happen. Through the glass wall, he watched Delaney in a conference room with a man in a dark suit he did not recognize. He did not know the man was a private investigator. His eyes narrowed. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Gabe and Juno delivered the walnut reading table to the Whitcomb Marsh offices on the 12th floor. Wes came along as delivery assistant. Juno carried her backpack with her sketchbook inside. If the girl needed to identify anyone in person, let the opportunity be available. In the elevator, Juno whispered, Daddy, the man who stood outside the shop. If I see him, should I draw him again? Gabe knelt to her eye level. No. You don't do anything. You stand next to Uncle Wes. That is your job. Juno nodded. Delaney met them at reception. Professional. Cool. Hollis was in the adjoining meeting room, and happened to pass through. Oh, the carpenter? I thought this matter was still pending. His voice was sweet. Gabe did not answer. Wes laid one hand on Juno's shoulder. Hollis offered his hand. That was the moment Juno looked up. She saw his left wrist, the blue dial, the steel bracelet. She did not speak, but her hand tightened on her backpack strap. Gabe took Hollis's hand. 3 seconds. Hollis's brow furrowed slightly. Gabe's hand did not feel like a carpenter's hand. The calluses sat in the wrong places. Hollis released the grip. Good luck with the trial. Thank you, sir. The table was placed in Delaney's office. She signed the receipt. Before Gabe turned to leave, she said, loud enough for Hollis to hear from the adjoining room, I hope your matter is resolved fairly, Mr. Rourke. That evening, Delaney invited Hollis to dinner at the marketplace downtown, a restaurant she knew well. Corner table, soft room, lit low with lamps rather than overheads. She wore a wire approved by the AUSA in Charlotte over objections from certain city officials. The device was smaller than a pen cap and taped above her left hip. She had practiced her breathing all afternoon until the rise and fall of her ribs had no story to tell. She led him the way she would lead a hostile witness. She said she was tired. She was considering suspending the audit. She was thinking about selling her shares and moving somewhere quieter. Hollis relaxed by degrees. He spoke more. She asked, as if in passing, do you know who attacked me, Hollis? He hesitated half a second. The carpenter. They'll convict him. But the voice, I'm not certain anymore. And there, reflexively, without thinking, he answered. You're certain. You told me, he said, quiet, Whitcomb. Remember? Delaney set her wineglass down slowly and did not pick it up again. She had spoken those 6 words to exactly 2 people, Thurlow and Estevez. They appeared in no public report. They were in no publicly filed court document. Hollis heard his own sentence hit the air and go wrong. His face blanched for half a second. Then he smiled. I read it in the affidavit, the sealed affidavit. 3 seconds of silence. Delaney. She stood. I'm tired. I'm going home. He could not stop her without confessing more, and he knew it. She walked out of the restaurant. In her car, she unclipped the wire and handed it through the window to Pilar, who was parked in the shadow of an oak across the lot. Her hands were shaking. Pilar looked at the little black device. We've got him. Delaney sat in her own car for 10 minutes. She did not cry. She dialed the Rourke Woodworks number. Gabe picked up on the 3rd ring. She did not introduce herself. You're going to be cleared. It may not be fast, but it will happen. I wanted you to hear it from me, not from a reporter or a lawyer's office. Gabe was silent for 3 seconds. Thank you, ma'am. But you don't need to feel like you owe me. You thought what you thought, with the data you had. My data was wrong. That was my mistake, not my data's. She ended the call. She sat another minute with the phone face down on her knee. The FBI and Asheville PD coordinated. Early Thursday morning, agents arrested Hollis Marsh at his home just after 5. He opened the door in a bathrobe and did not resist, though he asked twice for his attorney before the agent in charge was done reading him his rights. The charges stacked high: aggravated assault with serious bodily injury, obstruction of justice, criminal falsification, 7 federal counts tied to unlawful export of medical records under HIPAA and related statutes. The Hong Kong deal was frozen before close of business. Dean Harker was in reality Ewan Platt. A former private security contractor, Hollis, had paid $180,000 through Harker Consulting. Platt was picked up in Myrtle Beach 3 hours later. He flipped the same afternoon. Hollis had given him photographs of Gabe, his daily schedule, a recording of Gabe's voice made during the tobacco box visit, and the specific 6-word phrase. Hollis had chosen those words because he knew they would convince Delaney it was an insider. Darrow Finch was placed under parallel investigation. The remaining board voted to restore Delaney's full authority. Gabe's trial was canceled. The city prosecutor dropped every charge. The judge signed an order of dismissal with prejudice and expungement. At Beaumont's office, a technician cut the ankle monitor off. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Gabe said nothing. Marin picked Juno up from school early that day. When Gabe pulled into the gravel drive, Juno was already on the shop steps with her sketchbook. She stood up, walked to him, did not jump the way she usually jumped. She just wrapped her arms around his waist and stayed there for a long time. "Daddy's home." Gabe rested one hand on her head. "Daddy's home." Wes stayed one more night. Before he left the next morning, he set a thin envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was an old photograph. Gabe, Wes, and 5 others in fatigues, taken outside a compound in Kandahar in 2012. 5 men in the frame, all in desert camis, the light gone yellow with sand. On the back, in Wes's block capitals, "You held it together when you had to hold it together. You're allowed to come apart a little now, brother. Go to sleep." Gabe read it, folded it, and put it in the drawer where he kept Hannah's wedding ring. That afternoon, Delaney came to the shop. This time she did not stand across the street. She walked in. The bell over the door rang. Juno looked up from her sketchbook, looked at her father. Gabe gave her a small nod. Juno gathered her pencils and her book and slipped into the back of the workshop. Delaney stood in the middle of the showroom and didn't know what to do with her hands. She carried an envelope. She set it on the counter. "Formal retraction of my identification. My copy, you can tear it up." Gabe looked at the envelope. He did not reach for it. "I don't need to tear it up. That's your paper." Silence. The clock above the workbench ticked. "I don't know how to do this. There is no way." "You aren't angry at me?" He thought about it a moment. "I was angry for the first 2 days. After that, I realized you were frightened and you had a reason to be. Staying angry at you doesn't help Juno grow up." Delaney placed one hand on the counter, not touching his. "Close. The table is beautiful. I'm keeping it. I'll stand behind it. Walnut needs care every 2 years. 2 years then." She left. The bell rang behind her. Gabe stood where he was for a long time. 6 months later, the federal trial of Hollis Marsh ended. 18 years, no parole, for the compound of charges. Platt took 11. Darrow Finch lost his board seat and faced civil liability for accepting what federal prosecutors would later call a targeted bribe. Whitcomb Marsh Analytics was renamed Whitcomb Analytics. Delaney stayed at the helm. The company survived on total transparency and one painful restructuring round that cut 30% of executive compensation for 18 months. Delaney attended the sentencing's victim impact hearing. She stood before the judge, a single page of notes in her hand, and spoke briefly. She did not read from the page. She did not look at Hollis, who sat in a blue jumpsuit at the defense table and looked smaller than he ever had in a conference room. She mentioned Gabriel Rourke once, not to apologize publicly, because he had asked through his attorney that she not, but to be on the record. An innocent man was carried through 31 days he should not have spent. No one can give those 31 days back, but this court can note them. The judge noted them. Gabe kept working wood. His orders doubled after the local paper ran the story. He declined every interview request. He hired an apprentice, a young former Marine named Geordie, whom Wes had vouched for, and taught him to sharpen a handplane before he taught him anything else. Juno moved up to 5th grade. She still drew. The first drawing in her new sketchbook showed 3 figures in the shop: her father, Uncle Wes, laughing, and a blonde woman standing outside the glass, looking in. Under the woman, in her careful print, "She has eyes like open windows now." Delaney began to stop by without an appointment. At first every 2 months, ordering small things. A bookshelf for her mother. A picture frame for her father. A set of coasters cut from walnut scrap. Then once a month. Each visit a little longer than the last. She never announced herself. The bell above the door did it for her. In the 7th month, she came on a Saturday afternoon. Juno was doing homework at the work table. Delaney asked about the drawings. Juno showed her page by page. 40 minutes. Gabe worked in the back and did not interrupt, and when Juno laughed once at something Delaney said, he paused with his rag halfway down a chair leg and let the sound settle before he moved again. When Delaney was gathering her coat to leave, Juno asked, "Do you want to have dinner with us? Daddy makes spaghetti on Saturdays." Delaney hesitated. She looked at Gabe. Gabe looked at his daughter. Not surprised. Not prepared either. Juno doesn't invite people. Usually. Delaney understood that as a yes. "I'll stay." The three of them ate together. Nothing large was said. Juno talked about whales. She was studying them in school. Delaney said she had gone whale watching once in Monterey, and that the first whale she saw had surfaced close enough that she could hear it breathing. Gabe asked follow-up questions only when they were needed. After dinner, Delaney stood at the sink drying dishes while he washed. Their hands touched once when he passed her a plate. Neither of them pulled back right away. Neither of them said anything about it. She left at 9. Gabe walked her to the door. They stood half a step apart on the porch. "Thank you. The pasta was very good. Juno was glad you were here." A pause. "And you?" Gabe looked at her. "I was glad too." She drove away. Gabe stayed on the porch until her headlights disappeared behind the pines. 1 year and 4 months after the attack, Asheville turned toward autumn. Rourke Woodworks had a new sign, hand-painted by Juno, the shop name in a looping script, beside a small plane and an even smaller whale. Gabe had expanded the back and added a showroom floor of oiled hemlock. Geordie handled online orders and the growing waitlist. Revenue was steady. Delaney no longer stopped by unannounced. Now it was every Saturday, dinner with Juno. Sometimes Delaney cooked, and when she did, Gabe set the table without comment, and Juno watched the two of them move around each other in the small kitchen like people who had already learned the pattern. Juno had begun calling her Miss Delaney instead of her. Nothing further. No one pushed, though everyone in the house understood that something slow and certain was taking shape in the way slow and certain things took shape in that house. One Saturday afternoon, Gabe was applying a second coat of linseed oil to a rocking chair. The shop smelled of warm wood and late October. The light through the south window had gone the color of brass and laid itself across the hemlock floor in long, narrow stripes. Delaney came into the workshop and set a cup of coffee beside him. Black, no sugar. She had learned that. She watched him work. 3 minutes of silence. Then she said, "I'm thinking about selling the house in Biltmore Forest." Gabe looked up. "Too big? Too far from this shop?" He set his rag down. He looked at her. Delaney. It was the first time he had used her first name. She heard it land. Gabe. The first time she had used his. He spoke slowly. "I'm 41. I have a daughter who's still growing up. I don't do anything quickly. Including this. I know. That's why I'm having this conversation with you, instead of a real estate agent." Silence. Gabe spoke again. "I'm not making any promises, but I don't want you to move further away." "All right." That was all. No kiss. No declaration. She picked up a rag and helped him work the oil into the wood. They worked in silence for 40 minutes. The light through the shop window shifted from gold to rose to the blue that came before evening. That night, after Delaney left, Juno stood in the workshop doorway with a new drawing in her hand. She gave it to her father. 3 figures in front of a house smaller than the one in Biltmore Forest. A wide porch, a large oak. In the corner, in her print, "New house." "No rush, Daddy." Gabe knelt and pulled her in for a long hug. "No rush, sweetheart." He closed the shop, turned off the lights, locked the door behind them, walked to the truck with Juno holding his hand. They drove home. After everything that had happened, the cold fluorescent light of an interview room, the concrete pillar in an underground garage, a walnut table delivered to a 12th floor, and a 9-year-old girl with a sketchbook that knew more than the justice system did, Gabriel Rourke came back to the 3 things he had always had: a small workshop in Asheville, a daughter who had believed him from the first, second, and now a woman who had learned that data sometimes knew less than a pair of eyes like open windows. And that night, as his truck turned onto the road that led home, he did not speak. and did not need to, because time, like walnut, had begun to take on a color of its own.